Hello everyone, this is Madhush from JS Academy. In this video, we will explore how variable scope works in Java and JavaScript. Right, my main target of this video is to help out developers who comes from Java, C++ like OOP language to JavaScript. In this video, we are going to mainly focus about scope of the variables. Right, scope of the variables Java versus JavaScript. Right, here I will explain this thing mainly based on three main topics. The first one is module level scope, and the second one scope within the module, and the third one clauses and enclosures context. Right, clauses and enclosing context. Right, at a glance, when we look these things, we'll feel it's kind of very difficult, and it's very difficult to understanding thing, but it's not like that. It's very easy to understand. I will explain everything with simple code examples in a way that you can understand it easily. Okay, let's jump into first one. In the first one, module level scope. Right, you can see my screen. Here I have pointed out few things. In Java uses public, private and protected like keywords to define access level to classes, variables and method. Right? As example, public int, it can be accessible publicly, and private string, it's not publicly accessible, something like that. But in JavaScript, you may know these things, right? But in JavaScript use export and import mechanism, right? With the ES6 module, I will explain EX6 modules related things in future. Right, it's use export and import or module export required like keywords and things to define the access level, right? But in Java they use public, private and protected, like they have accessible level. But in JavaScript we don't have that kind of things. We don't have any access modifiers like private, protected and or private or protected or public like things. All exported variables are public to import modules. I will explain this point through a simple code. I'm going to explain this with Java side, right? You may know these things, but I will explain to understand this thing properly, right? So I have two classes. This is my module and this is main class. You know, right? I'm going to create an object out of this class, and this will create the new keyword will create an object out of this class, and then it will assign to this variable, and then we can access all the variables and methods that are in this class through this object, right? But when we going to access these things, methods and variable, we have to think about access modifiers like private, public and protected like things, right? So let's run this program. What will happen? First I will go to access count, right? It's a public variable, therefore we can access it without any problem. But when we try to access private variable, the name variable, right? Let's try to access that one. We should not be able to access that one. You can see we are getting error because this is private variable, right? What will happen for the protected variable? Right, I'm going to run this one. For the protected variable, I can access because my module and main class, both these classes are in the same package, right? Therefore I can access it. If we are in a different package, we can access this protected variable, What about the display function, display method, right? Display method we can access because this is a public, and then display method can access all the variables because everything are in the same class, right? So count variable can access, name also can access, even it's having private access modifier because the method and variables are in the same class, my module class. Therefore we can access it, and the version, right? So let's comment out these things and let's try to run module.display method. Right, this is a kind of encapsulation like thing in Java. We can access all the variables via this public method, right? Now you know the module level scope how it works in Java with private, protected, and with a different kind of access modifier. But in JavaScript it's totally different. Next I will explain how it works in JavaScript. In the first one, module level scope, right? You can see my screen. Here I have pointed out few things. In Java uses public, private, and protected like keywords to define access level to classes, variables, and method, right? As example, public int, it means it can be accessible publicly, and private string, it's not publicly accessible, something like that. But in JavaScript, you may know these things, right? But in JavaScript use export and import mechanism, right? With the ES6 module, I will explain EX6 modules related things in future, right? It's use export and import or module export required like keywords and things to define the access level, right? But in Java they use public, private, and protected, like they have accessible level. But in JavaScript we don't have that kind of things. We don't have any access modifiers like private, protected, and or private or protected or public like things. All exported variables are public to import modules. I will explain this point through a simple code. I have my module.js. There are having two variables and one function. These two are exported, therefore these two can accessible publicly, but this is not accessible because it's not exported. I will try to import these things in my indexed file. You can see how I imported that one here, right? I can access count because in my module I have exported it, right? And also display function, it's also exported, so I can access that one too, right? But can we access the name? No, because it's not exported. Therefore if we try to import this thing, right, it's undefined. You can see here the name is undefined. It means it's not exported in my module, therefore it should be exported before import. That's it. So in JavaScript it's very simple, and they don't have different access modifiers. The all variables are exported are public to accessible. That's it. In the previous section we have discussed about module level, right? It means module to module, how the access modifiers works and how it works, Java versus JavaScript, right? In this section we are going to talk about within this scope how variable access modifiers and those like things works, right? Then we can understand what's the difference between Java and JavaScript variables within the module, right? In the JavaScript use let const and var like things. The var is not, now it's not using popularly. It means it's kind of deprecated, but still we can use. But most of the developers, the var keyword is not using now. And other than that, we have to understand how let const things works within the module, right? And I will explain these things through a simple JavaScript code. And when it comes to Java has var variable. It's kind of module level variable, and Java has final variables. So it's kind of similar to const variable in the JavaScript, right? I will explain these things via simple code, right? Let's quickly jump to Java code, right? This is very simple Java code. So in here I have defined x variable and y variables. X variable have var type, and this y int variable having final, right? Final keyword. So all these things in this block, right? It's all these things in the same block. Therefore, this is a block level space, right? In Java, right? let's run this program. What will happen? Let's see what will happen. So we can see 10 printed 10 and printed 10, and there's no any errors. So therefore we can identify, we can assign variables to x. It means var type variable can assign values again and again. Let's try to assign a value to y variable, right? It's with final keyword. You can see x variable is a final variable. We cannot assign values to final variable. So in Java we cannot assign. It's like a kind of when we compare with JavaScript, it's like a const variables, right? In JavaScript side they have const keyword, const type variable. We cannot assign values to const type variable similar to this one. Okay, I will comment out this one again. Right, if we print y variable after this, let me print again x variable, what will happen? You can see my newly assigned value are on this x variable now, right? It means assigned correctly. Okay, I will comment out this one. And what will happen when we try to access x variable out of the block space? I told you before, this is the block space, right? This is a if condition, this is the block of if, and if we try to access out of the block space, what will happen? Yes, inside the block space we don't have any issue, we can access any of this variable. But if we try to access the same variable out of the box, right, out of the blocks, so what will happen? You can see x not accessible outside the block, right? We cannot access any kind of this variable out of the block, right? Y also same, right? It means any of var or final variables we cannot access outside the block, right? That's what I want to show you in related to the Java. Next we will jump to JavaScript, right side. Jump into JavaScript. I want to show you one more thing. You may know these things sometimes. What should we do if we need access x variable out of the block? Very simple. just we have to take this out of the block, then we can access this variable publicly inside this main method, right? So in here, now it's out of the block. Inside the block we can access this, and also in here also we can access this. Let's run this. What will happen? You can see x printed in here and also in here, so it means we can access inside the block as well as the after the block, right? Okay, that's the simple thing. So then we'll jump to JavaScript side, right? When we comes to JavaScript side, it's quite similar to Java, but we can identify major differences, right? In Java, this is the block space, right? And so I will clear the console and I will run it again. So what will happen? So you can see here my first log, second log, third log and printed, and the third log also printed, right? What's the reason that's x printed? Because it's in here we are going to access block level space, right? You have to keep in mind, even x is inside the block, it's a var type variable. The var type variable we can access outside the block. That's the reason, right? Okay, let's try to access y. You can see here y is not defined. It means we cannot access other variable, let and const variable outside the block, right? Z also not defined. It means let and const variable are not accessible outside the block, right? Let's try to access outside the function, right? Outside the function, this is not accessible. If you want to access this variable outside the block, as you mentioned before, we have to export this variable, right? I have demonstrated these things in the previous section. You should be remember it, right? Okay, the next thing, let's try to reassign variables. When we try to reassign a value to x, right, you can see we can reassign values to x variable because it's a var type variable. So let's try to assign values to y variable. Yes, it works. Right now y variable is 3. Okay, let's try to assign values to z variable. You can see error. Const variable cannot reassign, right? That's the thing. So let and var variable we can assign values and again, but in const it's a constant. We cannot assign values to const variable, similar to Java final, right? Okay, that's the main thing that I want to share with you. So now you have idea about how JavaScript and Java variable behave within the scope, right? It's mean within the module. So in the last section we studied about module level scope, and this section we studied about the within the module, how its variables works and behave. And the next step I will explain you how clauses and enclosing context works on Java versus JavaScript with the real examples. Last point, clauses and enclosing context, right? In Java and JavaScript, there's some small differences when we discussing about clause and enclosing related things. In JavaScript, clauses supports naturally. Function can remember variables from the scope they were defined, right? But in Java use inner class and lambda expressions, so we can access effectively final variables from the outer scope using inner classes and the lambda expressions. I will show you how it works through a small code. So let's jump into coding section. Okay, first I will discuss with Java. In Java, you can see here I have second class and main class. I have created object out of second class, and then I'm trying to access this what we called lambda expression. So what will happen here, so even this is a private variable, we can access this via this lambda expression, right? So this can be done by as I told you here, we can do this with inner classes as well as the lambda expressions. So here what will happen when we run this one, you can see here I'm getting 10. It's me, even this is a private variable, I can access that through this lambda expression. Let's try to access via direct code. Right, this is x means the object, x dot x means this variable. We cannot access that variable since that is a private variable. So if we make it a kind of, if we remove this modifier, access modifier, we can access it, right? But when we make it private, we cannot access it directly. We have to create a user in a class of lambda expressions, right? In Java side, right? That's how Java it's work. This the mechanism is pretty much same with Java and JavaScript, but the syntax is the different. So there's a small differences between in syntax Java and JavaScript. So let's move to JavaScript side, then you can easily understand what I'm talking about. Right, in JavaScript the logic is pretty much same, but the syntax is the different. So here we are going to access the x variable outside the function, so we can achieve that through so we can assign this outer function to this variable, and then it's a kind of referencing, and then we can just access that function, right? When we call to this function, it will call to this outer function, and inside that we have inner function. So what we'll call, it will return this x variable as a console log, right? The logic is pretty much same between Java and JavaScript, but the syntax is different, right? So that's all about the clauses and enclosing context. So how it's differ from Java to JavaScript, right? Yeah. now you have a better understanding about how the variables behave across the scopes between Java and JavaScript. Okay, even I try to create this video very shortly. It was a bit lengthy, but I think now you have better understanding about scope of the variable between how it's behave between Java and JavaScript. I discuss through three main points: module level scopes, closer and enclosing and scope within the module. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.